When the Coast Guard called me at midnight asking why my boat, the Lucky Escape, was cruising 5 miles offshore with a dozen drunk people dancing on deck, I thought it was a prank. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, sitting up in bed, still jet-lagged after flying back from a week-long work trip in Seattle. "Sir," the officer said, "your registered vessel was just boarded. There are no life vests, unlicensed alcohol distribution, and no one on board has a boating license. We need you to come down to the marina immediately." I threw on jeans and grabbed my keys, my heart pounding like a war drum. My boat. I had locked her up tight before leaving. She was docked at my private slip behind a gated entry. No one should have gotten near her. By the time I got to the marina, the Lucky Escape was tied up at the dock, flashing red and blue lights painting her white hull. Uniformed officers were still questioning a group of partygoers in dresses and polo shirts, people I didn't recognize. And then I saw her, standing stiffly, arms crossed, platinum blonde bob backlit by the deck lights. Olivia Cartwright, HOA president of the Windward Palms Residential Association. Mid-50s, permanently sour expression, the self-appointed god of our waterfront community. I walked up to the officers. "That's my boat, Frederick Taler." "I didn't authorize any of this." One officer raised an eyebrow. "You know her?" He gestured at Olivia, who was now pretending not to see me. "She's the head of our HOA," I said. "What the hell is going on here?" The officer sighed and pointed to a clipboard. They claimed they had permission. Said the HOA controlled the dock properties and could authorize recreational use for community events. I stared at him, stunned. That's not even remotely true. The moment Olivia noticed I wasn't going away, she finally walked over, lips pursed like she just sucked on a lemon. "Frederick," she said, voice dripping with fake concern. "We had to host the Windward Summer Gala somewhere since the clubhouse renovations weren't finished yet. Your boat was the most presentable option. You weren't using it. You broke into it." She waved her manicured hand. "Technically, the HOA has access rights to all shared dock resources." I laughed. "That dock isn't shared. It's deeded to my property. You know that?" "Well," she snapped, "maybe that's something the association should revisit. In the meantime, you're being unreasonable." "Unreasonable?" I said, stepping closer. "You trespassed, threw a party with God knows what kind of liability, and now the Coast Guard's involved, which wouldn't have happened if you kept your boat fully compliant," she snapped back. The officer stepped between us. "Ma'am, you're not helping your case." Olivia's face paled for the first time. She looked rattled. One of the Coast Guard officers walked over and whispered something to the lead investigator, who turned back to me. "We'll need to take an official statement, Mr. Taler. If you'd like to press charges for unauthorized use of your vessel, now's the time." I looked at Olivia. Her jaw was clenched, but her eyes darted everywhere looking for an exit that didn't exist. "Oh, I'm pressing charges," I said, "and I'm not stopping there." By morning, I'd already spoken to a maritime lawyer, filed a police report for grand theft, and handed over surveillance footage from a motion-activated dock camera I'd installed 6 months earlier. The footage showed Olivia unlocking the dock gate using a master key she had no legal right to possess, waving in a catering crew, and directing them aboard the Lucky Escape like she owned it. The footage also captured her slipping what looked like envelopes to 2 of the guests, one of whom was the association treasurer, Douglas Wright. That wasn't just trespassing. That was conspiracy. Detective Mara Clean from the county's Property Crimes Division met me at the precinct later that afternoon. Her tone was calm but clipped, the kind of voice that meant she'd seen enough HOA nonsense to know when something stunk. "Mr. Taler," she said, clicking a pen, "we verified the deed property lines. That dock is indisputably yours. The association has no rights over it, nor your vessel. Based on the footage you provided and the Coast Guard's report, we're preparing to submit charges for unlawful entry, misappropriation of private property, and possible insurance fraud." "Insurance fraud?" I asked. Clean tapped her notepad. "You mentioned a security system on board. Did it alert you to the unauthorized access? It's connected to my home Wi-Fi. I disabled notifications while I was out of town to avoid roaming fees." "Why?" She leaned forward. "Because the system was tampered with. The security module was powered off manually from inside the cabin. That's no accident. And if your boat sustained any damage during the event, and it did, The galley cabinet was ripped out. There are wine stains in the upholstery, and someone cracked the helm screen, then they're liable for damages. And if any repairs are claimed through your insurance without disclosure of the unauthorized use, that's insurance fraud. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my voice level. So what happens next? We're serving a warrant at the HOA office. If what we suspect is true, she didn't act alone. This wasn't some spontaneous party. This was coordinated. By the time I left the station, word had already spread. A neighbor named Linda, who lived 3 doors down and had always been polite if distant, waved me over as I pulled into my driveway. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, glancing nervously up the street. "But I thought you should know. I overheard Olivia talking to Douglas last week. She mentioned something about putting the boat to community use and how nobody would care if it was just one night. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Would you be willing to say that officially?" "I think so," I nodded. "Yes, if it helps." "It helps a lot," she said. While I gave her Detective Clean's contact info, a white Nissan with the HOA logo on the side rolled slowly past my house. The driver was Janice, Olivia's little lieutenant, the one who once wrote me up for inappropriate flag placement because my American flag was at a slight angle during a windstorm. She met my eyes through the windshield, then drove on without stopping. The show of intimidation was pathetic, but not unexpected. That night, I went over every clause of the HOA bylaws line by line. I'd never paid them much mind before, like most residents. But now, I dug into every paragraph like I was back in law school, and that's when I found it. Appendix D, Section 9. No member of the board shall engage in use of privately owned property for community purposes without written consent from said owner, regardless of physical proximity or perceived common benefit. Violation of this clause is grounds for immediate removal from office pending a vote by quorum. I wasn't just going to press charges. I was going to remove her. The next morning, I called for a special meeting of the HOA. According to the bylaws, any homeowner could do so with a petition signed by at least 10% of residents. I had 20 signatures by noon. Not everyone liked Olivia. Most tolerated her because she kept the landscaping tidy and the clubhouse stocked with coffee pods. But after word got out that she'd hijacked a neighbor's boat for a private party, even the fence sitters wanted her gone. By late afternoon, a county patrol car was parked outside the HOA office. Detective Clean and another officer emerged with a file box and a laptop. Olivia wasn't there. According to the officers, she'd left town that morning. Something. About a wellness retreat in Arizona. Coward. That didn't stop the process. Detective Clean confirmed they'd found emails between Olivia and Douglas discussing creative use of idle resident assets and how to frame the event as a sanctioned gathering to minimize liability. In one email, Douglas asked, "What if he finds out?" Olivia replied, "Then we spin it as a misunderstanding. He's reasonable." I had that printed out and ready. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Saturday evening in the community center. By then, the whispers had turned into full-blown outrage. Several residents reported finding leftover garbage from the party in their trash bins. Olivia had apparently ordered cleanup crews to distribute the waste off-site so it wouldn't be traced back. When I stepped into the meeting hall, it was standing room only. Folding chairs had been dragged from storage, and even then, people were leaning against walls with arms crossed. Douglas sat near the front, pale and sweating. He'd been summoned by the detective earlier that day and clearly knew the walls were closing in. I walked to the podium, unrolling the petition and placing it in front of the secretary. "My name is Frederick Taler. I'm the legal owner of 14 Windward Bay and the private dock adjacent to it. As of Tuesday evening, my property was unlawfully accessed by members of this board and used without my permission for a private event. I filed charges with the county sheriff's office and have provided evidence to support those claims." Murmurs rippled through the room. I held up the printed email from Olivia. "This was sent from the HOA server. It proves premeditation." "There was no misunderstanding." The murmurs turned into gasps. One man in the back actually shouted, "She used our dues for this!" "Yes," I said. "And worse, the bylaws are clear. Section 9 of Appendix D states that any board member who uses private property without consent is subject to immediate removal. I've met the petition requirement, I'm calling for a vote. Douglas tried to object, but the secretary and an older woman named Ruth, who'd been on the board for years, cut him off. We'll vote now, one by one. It took 20 minutes. By the end, the tally was overwhelming. 64 in favor of removal, 2 opposed, 3 abstained. Ruth stood and addressed the crowd. By majority vote, Olivia Cartwright is hereby removed as president of the Windward Palms Residential Association, effective immediately. Further leadership status is suspended pending legal resolution of any criminal proceedings. Applause thundered through the hall. Someone shouted, "About time!" Others clapped harder. I didn't smile. I just gathered my papers and walked out into the night, the cool, salt air brushing against my face like a reset button. Olivia hadn't faced the full consequences yet, but the cracks had formed, and I wasn't done widening them. Over the next few weeks, things escalated fast. Olivia tried to rally supporters through private emails, but most residents ignored her. The HOA Slack group was filled with screenshots of her own emails, showing her manipulation and the misuse of funds. Every attempt she made to regain favor backfired spectacularly. Douglas, on the other hand, was sweating bullets. He'd thought covering for Olivia would be easy, but Detective Clean wasn't known for leniency. One afternoon she called me with an update. "We've got enough to bring federal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud," she said. "Your insurance claim, the HOA misrepresentation, and the unauthorized use of a vessel that crosses state lines, these are serious." I exhaled. "So she's done for?" "Not yet," she cautioned. "But the process is in motion. The sooner she returns, the stronger our case." I spent the next few days cleaning the Lucky Escape, checking every hatch, panel, and locker. I wanted her pristine, not just because it was my property, but because I knew the case could drag into months. Evidence had to be bulletproof. Then came the court date. Olivia showed up, looking composed but tense. Her lawyer tried to argue that the HOA had implied consent, that it was a community-minded decision. The prosecutor played the emails, the security footage, and even the Coast Guard's detailed report of the parties' chaos. The courtroom murmured with each damning piece of evidence. When it was my turn, I recounted everything: the midnight call, discovering the party, the damage, and the emails. I kept my tone calm, letting the facts speak. Olivia's face was pale, her hands clenched in her lap. By the end of the day, the judge had seen enough. Olivia was convicted of unauthorized use of property, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction. Sentencing included community service, restitution to cover damages to the Lucky Escape, and suspension from any HOA leadership for 5 years. Walking out of the courthouse, the sun was just setting over the marina. I paused, looking at my boat, glistening in the golden light. She was mine again, safe, undisturbed, and intact. Back in the neighborhood, the residents slowly regained trust. Board meetings became transparent. Rules were enforced evenly. The fear that had gripped everyone whenever Olivia or Douglas made an announcement dissipated. Kids played freely near the docks, neighbors waved to each other again, and the sense of community, real community, returned. And me? I installed an upgraded security system on the Lucky Escape, not because I was paranoid, but because I'd learned that even the calmest waters could hide sharks in plain sight. Occasionally, I'd catch Olivia's new HOA emails in my spam folder. She never stopped trying to manipulate, but now they only made me smile. The community had won, the boat was safe, and the lesson was clear. Some people underestimate others, and some boats, especially the Lucky Escape, were not meant to be hijacked. I leaned back in my deck chair, the salt breeze on my face, a glass of water in hand. The sun dipped below the horizon, and for the first time in weeks, I felt completely, unshakably free. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more HOA stories.